Sometimes the dad hat just has to come first. Bless her. I don't know, maybe it's fitting in the story like we had today when the thoughts about something that's causing the grief just kind of rush in out of nowhere and take over. You ever been there? Yeah, I have. For a while, I had my dad's old red F-250 Super Duty truck. This thing was kind of having trouble when he bought it, and it never did really ever get any better. So after he passed away, we had it for a season, and I came to find out that the windshield leaked. And this is notorious in these old Fords from back in that era. They all did it. And what began to happen, water would find its way down through the leaky windshield, down underneath the dash to the ECM box. I know you don't know what that means, and it doesn't really matter. Here's what it would do. The ECM box, electronic box, would get moisture in it, and it would start creating a short that ran the battery down. And I would go out to start the truck, and the battery would be dead. And so I finally would caulk it and seal it, never could get it to stop. So I finally came up with this elegant solution. Every time rain was coming in, I went out and unhooked the battery. And it worked. I mean, in a sense, it kept things moving. I didn't have dead batteries, but, it never really actually touched what was wrong. And there's a lesson there in that we can build a whole way of life around just accommodating a problem that never actually gets dealt with. You with me? In the story that Leslie reread to you from Mark 5, Jesus and the disciples have crossed the Sea of Galilee, leaving the region, the Jewish region of Galilee. They've crossed over the lake into now a Gentile, a non-Jewish part of the territory. And now Jesus steps into a community that has done exactly this. They've learned to accommodate a problem that never had been actually solved. And of course, there's a man here. There's actually two men we know from another writer, but Mark is focused on just one of them. There's a man here who is possessed by evil spirits. Nobody could fix him. And in time, the town had found a way to just live with it, to keep him contained, out of the way. Meanwhile, for the community, life then has just gone on as normal. And then Jesus shows up. And he upends the whole arrangement, which leads to the town asking him to go away. And it turns out, as we walk through this story, the man isn't the only one in the story bound up by something that has control of him and a problem they've learned to accommodate that hasn't been fully solved. So this is the third final sermon in the series I've been doing here about the kingdom, signs of the kingdom. The sign that, this is John's word from the first two we looked at in the Gospel of John, a sign, not a miracle. The Bible doesn't use those languages. But a sign, this moment where heaven breaks into ordinary life and we're meant to see something true about the kingdom, not just something remarkable about what Jesus did that was really supernatural. That isn't the point. These events are signs about the kingdom and what it means for our way of living. Now, Mark doesn't call this a sign the way John does, but it functions the same way here. This encounter of Jesus and the man, it points past that event itself to who Jesus is, and really this, what his kingdom does wherever it shows up. And I've been challenged by that, as indeed I have been all along. What does God's kingdom want to do in our world when it shows up? And are we ready for it? So let me walk us through this story and see what we find. So here we go. Jesus, they've left kind of the Jewish realm. Now we're into a different ethnic place outside of Jewish land. And this is ground now where no one would have expected Israel's Messiah, and this is who Jesus is claiming to be. No one would expect Israel's Messiah to be able to lay claim to this particular ground. And yet, part of the point of the story here is Jesus is going to demonstrate he is Lord even here. He's not just Israel's Messiah. As soon as he steps out of the boat, we're told, a man comes from among the tombs to meet him. So now we're setting up this confrontation. And Jesus' authority at this point that we're going to see unfold, it takes a form of mercy. Notice this. The man comes running to Jesus. Jesus doesn't turn him away. He doesn't cross to the other side. He doesn't deviate to not have to deal with the encounter. But the man comes right to Jesus. And now Jesus will confront the power that is destroying this man and uses this authority to set him free. Now, when you kind of stop and you think about the man's condition, and we're going to have to kind of unpack, people clearly had been trying to restrain him. The man didn't put chains on himself, I don't think. And these are not metaphorical chains. These are actual chains. They got on him somehow. And all of the Gospels who tell this story make it clear it wasn't a one-time thing. It was over and over again. Often shackles and chains on his hands, maybe around his body, around his feet, one of the writers says. And the pattern had been the man was possessed by a strength that was supernatural, and he would continually break the chains apart. It's like Hercules. You can't contain him. No one was strong enough to subdue him. The chains wouldn't even work. And now we aren't told why. We don't know anything about how this man got into this condition. Because that really isn't the point. The man's condition is the point. Nor are we told why the community was concerned with trying to bind him up in the first place, other than he was possessed by something clearly that was very destructive. Maybe the chains they were putting around him was meant to protect the community. We don't know, but maybe the man was a threat to other people. He was so violent. We're told multiple places. Maybe in his violence, the destruction he would bring in his wake caused harm to other people. Maybe that was part of it, and he needed to be bound up and locked away. Maybe this was his family involved. We don't know. Surely he had friends or family. Maybe they were trying to protect the man from himself. Because we do see in here self-harm. The man's inflicting harm on himself. Maybe this was an attempt to bind him up to prevent that. Probably the answer is all of these things. However it has come to pass, whatever their intentions, he's been in chains over and over and over again. The chains could only contain him briefly. They never could restore him. And in this man's condition over and over again, the best the community could ever come up with was simply another chain, until finally he's expelled and excluded. And so here's what all this effort has left him. Night and day, among the tombs and among the hills, like the crazy man that we all imagine in our mind, this is what he is. The man's crying out, cutting himself with stones. He's clearly in the grip of something catastrophically dangerous. So that's the man Jesus now steps ashore and has this encounter with. And the man runs to him and falls at his feet. Verse 6 tells us, and this is a fascinating thing, a voice cries out from the man, "What do you have to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" Nobody has called Jesus this until this moment. Whatever is possessing this man, he clearly recognizes. Isn't it interesting that the first one in the region to recognize who Jesus truly is isn't a person, it's the power controlling this man. We have here a supernatural standoff. Now we're also told that Jesus had already commanded the spirit to come out of the man. That's where this conversation's kind of underway. So Jesus tells the spirit, come out. The spirit comes running to his feet. What will you have to do with me? Why are you concerned with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? And then Jesus says to him, "What's your name?" Now this is an interesting thing. This whole encounter, by the way, of Jesus casting out a spirit, which has happened multiple times in the Gospels, this one is so unique in many ways. We don't have record anywhere else of Jesus having conversations with the evil spirits trying to get acquainted. And yet Jesus does that here. "What's your name?" "And my name is Legion," he says, "for we are many." And Mark is taking care to give us this piece of information. Because legion is a term from the Roman military. A legion was not a company. I can't think right off the top, like a battalion. A legion was 1,000 soldiers. That's what I'm trying to get to, okay? A legion is a powerful military force. The man says, that's me, meaning it's not one spirit, it's an entire occupational army of spirits inside of this man. We are many. It's not one, it's an entire campaign. And yet notice, who's the one doing the begging? Down on their knees in front of Jesus. The one who's under the control of an entire force of demonic spirits. And here Legion is begging Jesus, don't send us out of the region. Don't kick us out of this part of the country. Allow us to stay here. They're having to ask permission. They recognize the authority of the one who's just stepped onto the shore. Now, they're not worshiping in the sense of adoration and love, but they do worship, and other gospel writers use this word. The man falls to his knees worshiping Jesus in this sense. He recognizes clearly who he is and what his authority means. So they, of course, beg, send us into this herd of pigs. Jesus gives them permission. The spirits leave the man. They enter the pigs and the entire herd, and we're told about 2,000 pigs, and this is notable, then, of course, rush down the bank, over the edge, into the sea, and the entire herd drowns. Verse 13. Now, I want to stop on this because this is a really fascinating detail. Why the pigs? Why did Jesus permit this? Did he need to? Like, was it a mandatory thing that the demons have to go somewhere and Jesus is sort of bound by the rules of demon exorcism? I don't think so, because again, when you look at other encounters where Jesus is casting out demons, nowhere do we find this concern of where the demon's destination is. The demons are just gone. They're just expelled. Jesus was under no obligation to find somewhere for them to go. Why is this in the conversation? Why is this taking place? Well, Mark doesn't tell us exactly, but he does show us several things at once. So I think there's layers of things happening here. First of all, we do see in this, Legion doesn't bargain with Jesus as an equal. We've kind of established that, this question of his authority. Even the occupying force of demonic spirits, which are real, by the way, and spiritual warfare is a real thing. They can't do anything without permission from Jesus. So this is a statement about Jesus' absolute authority. It doesn't matter whether he's in Jewish territory or not. But also, what was invisible in a way inside of the man now becomes much, much, much more visible. That this wasn't clearly a psychotic episode. There was something real possessing this man. In this very dramatic move, it leaves him and now takes up presence in a different set of creatures, and suddenly those creatures become equally chaotic and violent. And it's a way, I think, of reinforcing to us not only the power of demonic activity in our world, but what even lies behind that. The absolute destructive power of sin and what it wants to wreak on the human world. That sin in all of its forms, not just the devil made me do it, but sin in all of its forms, the radical corruption of God's creation in all of its forms is a power bent on destruction. And that's a very real thing dramatized here. And part of what's going on then is the deliverance that Jesus is bringing in his authority over all of these things, in his authority over sin, over the spiritual realm, over demonic activity. His authority is not only absolute, but that deliverance is never meant to be private. That in how this man is going to be delivered is setting up something for the people around him to contend with. It would be one thing if the man suddenly changed and relaxed and was delivered and became a normal person. That itself would have been dramatic enough, I think. But now here comes Jesus. He throws a whole wrinkle now into this whole business. The man is delivered, but it's not a private, quiet thing out on the edge of the sea. 2,000 pigs are now dead as a result of what Jesus has just done. And the whole region is about to hear about it. Colossians chapter 2 pictures Jesus Christ in this heavenly divine authority. Colossians 2 talks about Jesus Christ disarming the powers of darkness, the spiritual powers that we see in this man. In Colossians 2, Jesus is disarming these powers that wreak destruction in our world. He's exposing them in triumph openly. This too is Roman military language. The mighty general is marching in victory and triumph, having defeated all of the forces that oppose the kingdom. And that's part of what's playing out here. Legion, these forces have occupied the man, but when Jesus shows up, those forces, that destruction, didn't own him. It wasn't going to determine who he was at the end of the story, and it wouldn't determine how that story ended. Jesus is doing something altogether different, setting that world back. But I think there's something for us to go beyond just the demonic possession of the man, right? We don't want to flatten every human burden into demon possession. This particular story is about demon possession, but it points us to something more, to all human burdens. Not all human burdens are the result of demonic oppression. That's a real thing. We've got some brothers here from Haiti. It's a real thing. And these stories are not limited to the Bible. They still take place. But this story, I think, points us beyond that to tell us something about every power in our lives that isolates, that dehumanizes, that drives us toward isolation or destruction or loneliness. That when Jesus shows up in our condition, if we will let him, if we will see who he is, if we will recognize who he is, those conditions no longer have to rule our lives. That there is a freedom that comes with it. That the bondage this man is in a way, all of us have been, maybe still are, in our own kind of bondage. And part of the message here that is being proclaimed, that Mark is saying to us, that when Jesus is actually Lord and we let him be Lord, that bondage no longer has to rule, no longer has to carry the day. But there is a twist. See, the man is free. He is absolutely free, but 2,000 pigs are gone as a result. And now, moving on to the next part of the story, now everyone who hears what has happened because of the pigs has to decide what they are going to do with the one who did this to the pigs. You with me so far? Okay. So let's move on to the next part of the story. So Mark tells us the herdsmen who were with the pigs, which tells us right away, by the way, these aren't a bunch of wild pigs. This was somebody's economic investment. There's a lot of money tied up in this. Okay? The herdsmen, the pig herders, see what happens, and as you might imagine, they run off to go tell everybody about it. They tell it in the town and throughout the countryside. So word begins to spread even before Jesus and the disciples arrive into town. Like, they haven't even gotten to the city and all this is taking place. He just got off the boat. Before they make their way to town, word's already spread and people are waiting on him. They've heard about the pigs. They've heard about the man. And verse 15 tells us now they come to see the man for themselves. Now we're going to look at their response to this in just a moment, but let's stop and look at what we're told about the man now. And this powerful contrast. And I know the story, but slow down and attend to the details. The man had lived among the tombs, among the place where the dead are. Now here he is, sitting among the living. His body had been driven and wounded and out of control and violent. Now here it is, clothed. Another gospel writer, Luke, tells us the man had been naked. Nothing would stay on him. And here he is sitting clothed in his right mind, at peace, conversant, engaging. His mind had been overwhelmed by the voices that were not his own. Talk about a fascinating study, Lynn, in schizophrenia and all of the attendant psychological things that come with it. This was this man's reality. His mind had been overwhelmed by voices that were not his own. Now here he is. He can see clearly. He can think clearly. He's an altogether different man. And many people were probably not convinced it was the same guy. Is this really the case? Did this really happen? And for years, his life had been defined by what had held him back. And now, here he is, a whole new man. That's what the mercy of Jesus has done. And I just wonder this morning, and I'm thinking back through the places in my own life and journey. Have you ever encountered the mercy of God that way in your own life? Do you have such a story to tell about how the mercy of Jesus has come to you and made you altogether different and new? If you never have, part of what this story is telling us this morning is you can. You see, Jesus has not merely removed an unclean spirit, the way the wording used. Jesus has restored a man, his dignity, his clarity, his identity, his health, his peace, his place among the people, and now there's a possibility of a future back in the community. The tombs are no longer his home. The chains are no longer his prison. And Legion is no longer his name. That's what the mercy of God will do when we're willing to bow down before the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. But now back to the people. So here this dramatic change is. And they knew who the guy was. Everybody knew who the guy was. Right? It's part of what they're coming to see. And you would expect, would you not, if you stop and think about this, would you not expect some degree of relief and maybe even celebration? Wow, man, the problem's solved. I don't have to unhook my battery every time. My truck works. I'm excited. You would expect, wouldn't you, that in such a remarkable transformation, the people are relieved. He's no longer a threat. His family, he's back. His friends, oh my goodness, we get our friend back. I don't know. Is this unreasonable? This makes sense to me. A man they'd known, a man they could never help, is at peace. I mean, even that alone ought to be worth something. Instead, Mark says, verse 13, having seen all of this, having heard all they've heard, what is the response of the people in the community? They were afraid. They were afraid. Now again, Mark doesn't tell us what's behind that word. But the request they make next, it does tell us something. It does tell us something. That whatever else they felt, they did not want Jesus to remain. You just stop and sit with that for a minute. You've just seen what's taking place. You've just seen this amazing thing. Whatever else they felt, they did not want Jesus to remain. Maybe we understand this kind of disruption better than we might admit. And just a funny story of that. At our house, somehow, this was never planned, but somehow at our house, everyone has an assigned seat at our dinner table. I don't know how it came about. We never had a family meeting about this. There are no name tags on the chairs. It just happened somehow. And boy, you have a friend over, or you got family over, and you come to dinner, and you just watch the chaos that unfolds when the new person comes in and takes the wrong seat. And my goodness, it's 20 minutes of trying to figure out who's supposed to be sitting where. I'm not overplaying that, I don't think, am I, Sarah? That's amusing, right? But small disruptions have a way of revealing how really attached we are to the arrangements that we have made in our life. Yeah? And this is no small disruption in this community. You see, this town had learned to live with this man out among the tombs. Keep him at a distance. Try another chain. Let ordinary life, though, continue everywhere else. As long as he's there, we're good here. But now the man is free at the expense of the herd being gone. And the pig herd is the variable in here that is getting our attention. And now Jesus is standing in front of them. And his presence, this is what Mark is now driving at. His presence is not going to leave their world the way they had arranged it. John says in John chapter 3, the light has come into the world, and people love the darkness rather than the light. I think that verse has some bearing on this encounter here now with the people, right? Because we like to think, boy, the light comes in and suddenly everybody goes, oh, now we get it. Except that's not often what happens in the Gospels. It's not what happens here, right? Why do people love the darkness more than the light? You see, because when the light comes along, light does not only show us what the world around us is like, it also has this nasty way of revealing what's inside of us, all of us. So here, the light that John was talking about in chapter 3 of his story, Mark is now talking about the light had come into this community. And it revealed more than the condition of one tormented man. His condition was rather obvious on the outside. But his encounter, Jesus' presence, is now beginning to address the response, the condition of the entire town. And this is uncomfortable. Because the man has been freed, and the mercy of God's on full display. And the opportunities and the life that awaits is right there in front of us. But now the people must decide whether they're going to welcome the one who freed him. Maybe we are willing to receive what Jesus offers to us as long as we're in charge of it. As long as what Jesus wants to give us doesn't disturb our plans or touch our priorities or ask us to surrender the life we have carefully arranged. This is the reality of the call to discipleship. Over and over again, Jesus and his disciples are confronting this question in a multitude of ways. And at one point, Jesus says to them, if any man is going to follow me, what's the first condition? Let him die to himself. That's an upending of one's world, to die to oneself. There's another time when James and John, I can imagine them as my two boys, when they were younger, constantly squabbling, constantly arguing, constantly trying to one-up each other. And James and John, they get into an argument, and they get their mother involved over who is going to have the position of authority next to Jesus when his kingdom gets established. And so finally, mom comes in to negotiate. Jesus won't have any negotiation. And he says to the boys, you have it all wrong, guys. In my kingdom, your priorities will be upended. What you think is good will not be. He who is last shall be first. When Jesus, the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings, comes into our world and brings the kingdom to us, he will not leave our world arranged the way that we've had it. He does not merely come to fit as a part of our world. He comes as Lord, demanding absolute surrender of all of it. And now here the people are confronted with a power they could neither manage nor predict. The townspeople chose the world they knew over the freedom that was standing in front of them. They saw what Jesus had done. They saw the cost it had for them. And they asked him to leave. Mark says they were afraid. I don't think any biblical commentary, any preacher who encounters this story, who encounters that word, says it all. Nobody interprets that this way. The people were afraid because they didn't understand how Jesus did this miracle. This wasn't superstition. This wasn't, ooh, that's a spooky thing I don't get. They were afraid of what it would mean to their well-being, to their life, to their comfort. And one can only imagine. Again, we infer a lot, and it's interesting to read the commentaries on this. A lot of different people wrestle with this kind of thing. We don't know for sure because the details aren't here, but we can infer 2,000 pigs. Somebody owned those. That wasn't a flock of pets outside the house. Now, I don't know what the economics are because I haven't been able to find what the value of a pig was in first century Decapolis during this world, during this time. So I don't know what the economics are, but whatever the number is, one might imagine it's got some kind of market value. Multiply that by 2,000. Somebody's capital investment just went over the edge of the cliff into the water. And one is probably justified to assume the owner of those pigs was probably furious. And one then can also imagine everybody else having looked at that and said, man, if Jesus is going to do that to that guy, what's he going to do to me? Am I next? That's the afraid. They saw what Jesus had done. They reckoned with the potential cost to the upheaval it might bring in their world, and they asked him to leave. And here's the thing. Jesus does. Jesus never forces himself onto people. Jesus will come to us offering the kingdom, but at some point, even still, if we ask him to leave, as C.S. Lewis says, God's a gentleman, and he will do as he's asked. No argument, no forcing the issue. He doesn't try to plead his case. He doesn't try to talk him into it. They ask him to go, and he goes. But just as he's stepping into the boat, Legion, the man formerly known as Legion, comes running up to him, begging him to go with him, and you can understand why. Jesus is the one who had come looking for him. Jesus is the one who freed him. Why would he want to be anywhere else? The natural response is, I want to be with you, Lord. I want to be with you, Jesus, as it should be. But Jesus says, no. Go home to your friends. Go home and tell them how much he's done for you, how much he's shown you mercy. And this word mercy showing up again. Mercy is what happened. Mercy crossed the lake to find him. Mercy broke the power that no chain could hold. Mercy now sends him home. And if you think about it, going with Jesus might have been easier. He could have left his history on the other side of the lake. He could have gone to a new place with a fresh start. Nobody knows his name. Nobody knows his background. Nobody knows who he was like. But Jesus sends him back into his home, probably where the people knew every chapter of it. They knew about the cemetery. They knew about the chains. They knew about the violence, the years nothing worked. They wouldn't need convincing. Something happened to this guy. They knew the old one. And now here he is standing in front of him, of his home people, the people that in his community as the evidence. I'm not who I once was because of the mercy of Jesus. Go tell them what the Lord has done for you. Tell them how he has shown you mercy. And the man does. And later we'll read that Jesus' fame and reputation had spread throughout all of the Decapolis as time goes by. N.T. Wright says this man perhaps was the first missionary to leave Jesus to go out into the world. Whatever it is, the town had asked Jesus to leave. Jesus does, but he leaves behind a witness. The man who had once filled the cemetery with his cries now fills the region with the story of his mercy. And what Jesus had done in him, Jesus was now sharing through him. And so as we finish this morning, and you guys can go ahead and come up to do our last song. I know I've run long, but I just want to ask you, where are you in this story? Where do you see yourself? Maybe you are in some way in your own life still among the tombs. Maybe you are carrying something no chain, no effort, no routine has been able to free you from. And you've tried to figure out how just to accommodate this in your life, but you're still among the tombs. And maybe you then need to hear that the tombs are not the end of the story. And what holds you is not who you are. And your worst chapter does not have the right to determine your future, because Jesus comes and will come to you as Lord to restore, return, and give you a story of mercy. Is that where you are? You need that? Maybe we're standing with the townspeople. We're close enough to see what Jesus can do and has done in the lives of other people, but really we're afraid of what he might disturb if we let him have his way fully, if we let him stay. Is that where we are? Or maybe, hopefully, we're the man at the boat, that we have received mercy in some life-changing way, where God has come to us. We know we are not who we once were, and now Jesus is asking us and reminding us and challenging us, go back and tell the story of the mercy you've encountered. Where are you in this story this morning? Because we're all of us are someplace in here. Wherever you find yourself, Jesus is calling for a response. Let's close our eyes. And as we sing and pray here at the end, the invitation this morning is for all of us to bring to him what has held us back, what holds us still from responding to him. Let's open our hands. Let's let go of what we've been protecting or what we've been unable to address or fix. Lord, this morning, friends, all of us, we can receive mercy. We can receive freedom. And it's not just for ourselves, but in doing that, the mercy will fill us to the point that we can and will and want to go out and to share with others what has happened to us.